our show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Large Glass. I'm Todd.
I'm Terri.
It's nice to see you all. Mom's there. How's it going?
Hello.
This is our weekly broadcast where we bring you a new artist or art-related theme every week. It's nice to have you. There's Pumpkin Audrey.
Hi.
Good to see you. John Park is here. Good to see you.
Hello.
Ben Hagenbush is here.
Ben.
How's it going? All the usual suspects are filing in,
Yes.
as they do. It's
That's
nice.
great.
We've had a crazy week this week.
We have.
I mean, I was like, there's Dave and 63. What's going on?
Hey,
and Jess
how
Park.
are ya?
All right, everyone's here. All right, now we can officially start. I was in Brooklyn yesterday.
You sure were.
I got to go over to the Brownstone Art and hang out with David Backus, and we did a really nice interview, which you're all going to see next week. Which we're going to bring a really great show and a live artist next week. That's really exciting. While I was there, I also got to go hang out with Jim Osmond in his studio.
That's really cool.
That was-
And you're still talking about it too. You're still talking about
We
how
had Turkish
awesome it
coffee and
was.
so,
You hung out.
yeah, it was a good day.
Sounds like a good day.
I'm tired today though. So
I imagine you are.
Alan
Terri,
Wexler is here. Nice to see you,
Hi.
Alan. Thanks for coming. And I'm a little jealous about the Venice thing. I just want to put that out there, but not to announce that, but you know. Pumpkin Audrey, Terri, the blue scarf is so pretty on you.
Why, thank you.
So we've got a cool artist tonight.
We do.
And I wanted to kind of, should we drink first?
Of course. I'm never going to say no.
Never, when would you ever say no to that?
That's right.
Well, the drink I'm preparing tonight, I know is not going to be one. I'm going to let you try it, but I don't think you're going to like it.
That's okay.
You're pre-gaming with...
I've got my large
Terry's
glass.
pre-gaming with the largest
With
glass
my
of
large
wine.
glass.
Yes. So, good job, honey.
Yes.
All right.
Prepared.
So, our artist tonight
Yes.
was born in New Orleans. And I thought it was a great opportunity to actually begin sort of, I'm interested really in kind of mixing some cocktails on the show. And so when Terry and I were in New Orleans a few years ago, we went to a fantastic bar that specialized in cocktails. Now, what's interesting about New Orleans and cocktails is the cocktail itself, the very origin of the cocktail, is from New Orleans. So a gentleman by the name of Antoine Peychaud in 1838 invented the cocktail. Now what's interesting about this is he used to mix it in a cocotier, which is essentially an egg cup, right? He would mix it in an egg cup and let it sit for a few hours, and then he would serve this to his masons. But it kind of cocotier morphed into the cocktail. So there's some interesting stuff about this, but he called it the Sazerac. The name of the cocktail is the Sazerac. And they believe it was named after a brandy that he loved, which was branded Sazerac. But we're gonna make a Sazerac tonight on the show, and it requires 2 rocks glasses, or in my case, if you're like me, I like my ball jelly jars. So what you do is we're gonna start with one of these jelly jars that's gonna be packed with ice. Just to give it a little chill.
Did you want to switch the camera?
Do you want me to switch the camera so you can see
Might
what I'm
be able
doing? I
to
mean, I
see
don't know
what
if this
he's
is actually going to
doing.
help or not, but I've got one that we're going to pack with ice. And the second one, now typically you would use a sugar cube in this. The original ingredient, the key ingredient in the Sazerac used to be absinthe. Now absinthe, as some of you may know, is a really interesting spirit, not liqueur. The difference between a liqueur and a spirit is basically a spirit mixed with sugar before bottling is a liqueur. A spirit has no sugar in it. And while absinthe is typically drunk with sugar, it is not in fact a liqueur. So we are going to, you would use typically a cube of sugar. I don't have a cube of sugar. I'm going to approximate a cube of sugar. And isn't it funny that Antoine Peychaud has his own bitters named after him? 3 dashes of the Peychaud bitters. 1, 2, 3. Boom. In with that sugar, and we're going to let that sit a little, dissolve a bit. And then it's 1.5 ounces of Sazerac rye. By the way, I bartended for 9 years. So my
so he
pours
knows what he's doing.
my pours are often a little heavy if you're visiting my bar, but for the sake of this tonight, I'm going to just, do a true count. So we've got the Sazerac rye mixed with our sugar and bitters in this glass. Now we're going to return to our iced glass. We're going to pour that out, and I have the remains of a bottle of absinthe from the Czech Republic. Now, absinthe was invented in the 18th century, but became very popular in the late 19th, early 20th century, especially in France, where a lot of writers and painters used to drink it in the bars. No surprise that social conservatives, were sort of opposed to this because all of the dirty bohemians used to drink it, and also it has an incredibly high ABV or proof. And it was believed to cause hallucinations. Now that's rumored because a lot of people, Ben saying the Dracula drink, yes. Carolyn's like, the real stuff will F you up. Carolyn, this is the real stuff, okay? This is the real stuff. And I have to tell you, I was heading out to get a bottle of the new stuff because it was banned. And it's only been made in the real way in limited quantities. You can get it again. But a friend of mine happened to stop by the house just as I was on my way out to pick up the real stuff, or the fake stuff, or the stuff. And he said, oh, I've got a bottle of it from the Czech Republic. You're welcome to it. And I was like, yes, please. So what we do with our iced glass is 1/4 of an ounce of the absinthe. Not much. Actually, that's probably a really heavy pour. But all we're really doing with this is we're coating the inside of the glass. Right, we're coating that inside of the glass. I really do not want that much absinthe in this drink, and I'm really reluctant to pour it back or pour it out. So I'm pouring it back because it's really just functioning as a flavor. Okay, now we're gonna take a little shot here. We're gonna add them, mix them together. Now typically I would put 1 or 2 cubes in this just to kind of open that flavor up in that rye. Since the jelly jar is small, we'll have it with 1 because I think that's appropriate. 63 says, yeah, the fact that they were smoking opium didn't help. That, and a lot of painters actually mixed pigments and paints with the absinthe, which I can't quite figure out to this day, but nonetheless. Now we're gonna garnish with a little bit of a lemon. I'm not gonna actually cut a lemon wedge, but I am just going to take a peel here. My peel split in half. Take this around my rim. Very nice.
Oh my. How does that...
Wait a minute. I can't do this without you. Hold on a second.
You see...
Anyway.
I've got my large...
The Sazerac. Now, one last quick little thing. Thujone, which is a compound, it's a chemical compound that is known to exist in trace amounts in the absinthe, is rumored to be the thing that caused the hallucinations. There's little evidence to support that. And, I think a lot of the hype and what got absinthe banned in the first place probably isn't fair to the drink itself. You had a lot of artists and writers that were drinking this in insanely heavy quantities, and given that it's 140 proof, it's not something that you probably want to drink at all. So any quantity is probably going to be, that's why I only coated the inside of my glass with this. Here's to episode 57.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We'll see how this goes down. Cheers to all of you. Let us know what you're drinking in the chat. 63 says, well, just for breakfast. Wow, this is good.
Is it good?
Yes.
I'm curious on how it smells.
Go ahead. It's got a little bit of an anise, a little licorice, a little lemon.
Yes.
It's a little sweet. I had one of these in New Orleans. I ordered this in New Orleans.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah. Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, enough of that. That's tonight's drink. What do we got going? You gave away a pin this week.
Oh, we sure did.
You did.
We had such a good time on that contest because so many people were participating and a lot of people got stumped, and I loved that. So picked just a little bit of a detail from a fairly well-known painting. I don't think anybody was anticipating it, and because I think I chose a section that was far away from the actual subject material, it threw people off. And I did that because Mike Rader last week said it was too easy, or at least he alluded to it.
Well,
so.
he kind of played a good game with it. He was kind of like, I wonder what that is.
Yes.
But I will say this, it got a lot of action. For those of you that are not following the Large Glass Instagram, Terri puts a contest up every Thursday where she crops a painting. She's like, guess the artist.
Yeah.
Now, if you guess it, you get a pin.
And I'll tell you, I pick well-known paintings. I'm not going to pick something that's really obscure or anything, because people still have a hard time guessing. When you look at the perspective differently, or you just look at a little piece of it, it's a whole new way to see something maybe you didn't see before.
All right, so let's go back through the comments here, because a lot of good stuff in here. So Carolyn Thou says, you actually want that sugar cube so you can suck on the cube. Ooh. It's the French way. Very true. But in the case of the Sazerac, the cube is supposed to be crushed after it's soaked with the bitter. So the cube is there just sort of to kind of suck it up. Then you crush it. Let's see. We've got John Park is having a boring Chardonnay. I'm sorry. Carolyn Thou's not drinking much today. Pumpkin Audrey, a plain gin and tonic. I wear my pin with such pride and got my t-shirt. Thank you. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. So hang out on Thursdays on Instagram with us and play that game. See if you can find out who that artist is. It's a good time.
And I still have to send out a bunch of pins. So this weekend we're going to do it. I know I said it last weekend, but I mean it this weekend because my envelopes are coming in. So.
Well, and real quick, a special thanks, I have to say, a special thanks to Jeff McConnell. I live in an area with some great artists, and Jeff McConnell was the one who actually stopped by and brought me this absinthe. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to him. He's a photographer. He works a lot with really interesting pinhole photography. It's easy to remember his name because it's 2 F's, 2 C's, 2 N's, and 2 L's. JeffMcConnell.net. And thanks for that. Go check out his website. Fantastic photography there.
Yeah.
All right, let's do a supporter. You want to do that?
We can do a supporter.
All right. So tonight's featured supporter is One Good King.
One Good King.
Thanks, One Good King. We don't know if you're here tonight. It's nice to have you on board. We really appreciate your support. We love it when you're in the chat. You always give, great commentary in there. So hopefully you're here tonight. If not, we'll see you soon. And thank you. Okay. Let's go. Oh, wait, there's Jeff McConnell again. I always forget to turn that off.
Yeah. Well, he could use.
Jeff could use a few more plugs.
Out. Yeah.
He might show up every time we do the screen. What do we have for... Oh, there he is. One Good King just signed on.
Yay.
Good to see you.
Thank you for being a featured supporter tonight. Okay.
I just thought of that terrible line from the movie Grease.
Oh, which one?
Never mind. In the movie, never mind. All right. We won't talk about that. News?
We can go to news.
All right, I'll do the news. Here we go. Well, I got to figure out where my news slides are. There they are. Okay. So we got a couple of things in the news, and as you know, like when it comes to news, I oftentimes, I got this NFT buzz thing going on, and I talk about it a lot. Plus, there's a ton of it going around, so you can't not talk about it. So new NFT thing. So the British Museum is going to be taking 200 works. You ready for this? 200 works by this man, including this piece, and turning them into NFTs. Now, it's interesting the way they're going about it, right? They're going to be taking them and distributing them in different levels of quantity. So there's going to be unique ones. Now, this big wave one will actually be produced twice as digital copy and offered 2 times, once between September and December, and then once again in 2022. So that would be like a unique offering in that there's only 1 or 2 of them. Then there are like uncommon, very rare, common offerings, up to 10,000 copies of particular pieces that you could, in a sense, buy the digital scan of. Whether or not we want to participate in the argument about all the value of all that is fine. I just think it's interesting that, this sort of thing is happening, and I find it to be actually kind of interesting. They're also going to be offering them in drops, meaning they're going to appear at different times, staggered, so that it kind of builds a little bit of excitement around the actual offerings. So Hokusai, I guess you're going digital, which is kind of interesting. Let's see, what else do we have? And Look at this. One Good King just gifted 5 tier 1 subs. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Thank you for that. And they're going out to a whole bunch of people, so good for all of you guys. So let's see. Let's talk about this painting, and let's talk about this painting. The first painting, this is a Vincent van Gogh painting, The Parsonage Garden at Nonen. And this painting is by Hals, and it's 2 laughing boys with a mug of beer. Okay? Both of these paintings were stolen inside of just a couple of weeks of each other in Holland, 2 separate museums. However, the man who supposedly stole them has been convicted. Now, it's kind of interesting because this guy has a track record. He's got a long record of actually stealing artifacts from museums, and he's served time for this already in the past. But he goes after the Van Gogh, he goes after the Hals. The interesting thing is the Hals was already stolen a few years ago and recovered and thus insured for another like $18 million because it was the target of a theft. But anyway, the Singer-Laren Museum, and another museum that I'm just going to have the hardest time pronouncing because I'm just not up on my Dutch, but it's the Hofje van Moevroe van Arden in Leerdam. And this is a picture of that museum there. Now, the Hals was stolen from the first one, the Singer-Laren, and the Van Gogh stolen from this one. There were some clues at the site that sort of led to some DNA, and ultimately the conviction of this man, who, by the way, they're very good with privacy over there. So we only know that his name is Niels M., about 59 years old, convicted in this. He's going to serve 8 years. That's all he's getting. And by the way, the paintings were not recovered. But the objects left behind were some straps that he used to lower it down on an awaiting scooter. They rode away on a Vespa. There was a broken frame that had some DNA evidence on it. And this guy walks up to the museum with a sledgehammer and just smashes in the door. I mean, he doesn't like fiddle around with little like lock-picking systems.
No,
he just smashes open the door.
Mine.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm taking this.
Wow.
Fantastic stuff. All right. And finally, the last thing in the news tonight is on the local scene, the Center for Contemporary Art in Bedminster, New Jersey, is going to be hosting a couple of really great exhibitions coming up. And so we're excited about those. The first one is an exhibition curated by John Reiking, who is a ceramicist, and it's going to be featuring the work of a number of ceramic artists from across the United States. And the second one is a juried exhibition of their members. They're going to be running concurrently. And the thing I like about the Center for Contemporary, I like a lot of things about the Center for Contemporary Art, but I actually reached out to them and I said, what's going on with the opening reception for this show, which, by the way, is October 1st. The show runs all the way into December. But they said, well, we're doing a reception, but it's going to be a timed entry based on RSVPs to their invitation. So you can go to their website and check that out. I believe I have that up here. So you can head over to the Center for Contemporary Art. I don't have their website available, but I'll tell you what I'll do. On the YouTube video tomorrow on the posting, I'm going to put the links for that. If you're in the New Jersey area, this is a great institution. I really admire what they do, and you should definitely stop by and see both of these shows. I think they're going to be awesome. And that does it for a very long-winded news section. Do you have it?
I think I do.
You do have it.
It's so I'm just gonna spell it out. It's CCABED. Well, it's ccabedminster.org.
ccabedminster.org.
Center for Contemporary.
Don't worry, I'm
Art,
going to put the link in the I'll put the link in the description on YouTube tomorrow. You guys will have a link.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's jump over to birthdays. We're
Jump
already
to
at 8:20.
birthdays.
All right, here we go. Let's see who we've got on birthdays. This guy's cute.
This guy is cute. Well, I guess he's born the same day. I was thinking the other guy was going to come up first, or Brawler. But this guy's good. This is Francois Boucher. He's known for very frilly paintings. I remember my art history teacher saying it was a lot of boudoir paintings and pink fleshy skin tones and all of that. He was born September 29th, 1703, French Rococo painter, also draftsman. He was into etching. You were going to say something?
Alan Wexler's asking, what did Gertrude Stein drink during her salons at 27 Rue de Fleurus? I wonder if it was this.
I'm not sure.
Well, if we can research that, Alan, maybe I can make that on a show.
Yeah,
Actually,
that'd be
we
cool.
could find out what that's all about. Yeah. I'm really interested in finding things like that out. What a particular artist liked to drink.
Yes.
With the exact recipe.
Yes.
And making that on the show.
And make the cocktail. Yeah.
Good point.
Then we can make a cookbook or some kind of.
Oh, we should have a recipe book.
And we can have a recipe
for drinks.
Book. Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll give everybody a heads up. Yeah. And then
We're
they can
on
make
this.
it too.
We're gonna do this.
Yes.
We're gonna do this.
Yes.
All right. So
but
Boucher.
Back to Boucher. So very classical, voluptuous, allegorical scenes, cupids and stuff.
Putti. You say Cupid, I say Putti.
Okay.
Do you want me to sing some Frank Sinatra?
Go ahead. Happy birthday. This guy, this is our brawler. This is Caravaggio. He was also born on September 29th in 1571, a little bit older than Boucher by about close to 200 years. An Italian painter. We know him because of chiaroscuro and tenebrism and these very dark light contrasts, which is what that's all about. Killed a man. Very exciting life. Went into bars, beat up people. Yeah.
He painted this portrait of me preparing for the show.
Oh, did he? Yeah, look at that. A little bit of foreshadowing. Is that me on the side? I don't know. Happy birthday, Caravaggio.
Happy birthday, Caravaggio. I
Yes.
just want to put something out there before I go to the next slide. I was forced to do this.
He was, because I am technically challenged. So let's go to the next slide, because we have a very special birthday coming up. This is my technology right here. September
For real?
30th.
The frame for real?
Yeah.
Oh, you're sweet.
September 30th. I won't say what year, but Todd's birthday is coming up on Thursday, and he's a talented artist.
Thank you, dear.
Fantastic
dear.
conversationalist.
Should we move on to the next?
Excellent mix master.
Can we move on to the next one now?
Technological guru.
Not based on this cast, we're not.
Absolutely adorable.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Todd.
Thank you very much. Thank you, love. I appreciate that. All right, moving on.
Moving on. So the next one we have is Annie Leibovitz.
Thank you,
know
Jess.
her.
Thank you, Jess. Sorry, it's Jess.
No, that's okay.
I'm just saying thank you.
Aw, how cute. Okay. Annie Leibovitz, October 2nd, 1949, American photographer. We know her for her very famous portraits of a lot of celebrities.
I picked one you're going to like.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I do like that one. It's the Queen and all of her great-grandchildren. So, yes, that's fantastic.
Thanks, one good king.
Yes. So, happy birthday, Annie.
Happy birthday, Annie.
And here we have Pierre Bonnard. He was born on October 3rd in 1867. He's a French painter, illustrator, printmaker. He's known for his use of color. That's gorgeous. That's a really good image that you selected.
I like that one.
Yes.
I like that one. Thanks, 63. Oh, you were just a couple. Wait a minute. Why don't we have 63 on the list?
He was on Sunday, and I actually saw it on Facebook this week.
Did you add him to the list?
He's on the list for next year. We kind of go like the week in advance. So happy birthday!
Happy birthday, 63! You're on the list
Yes.
for next year. And I have to say, I'm the proud owner of at least 2 of 63's pieces.
My favorite mug is by 63.
Yeah, but I've got 2 sculptural pieces.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I do. And I'm going to absolutely, maybe photograph those for when we do the birthdays with 63 on it. So.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see.
Let's see.
Moving on from Bonnard.
This is Jean-Francois Millet. He was born on October 4th, 1814.
Come on, of course you've been found out. What do you think? You don't think we do our homework? I gotta stop drinking that thing.
Well, this is the problem with a little drink like this, because I feel like our show's a sipping show, and you have to constantly keep sipping because that's fun. It's like the habitual sip and drink and talk and all of those things. And you can't really do that.
You got to be careful.
You have to be careful with this one because you're going to light yourself
Millet.
on fire.
Let's say happy birthday to Millet.
Happy birthday, founder of the Barbizon School, which focused on realism in France. That was established for a 40-year period. So happy birthday, Millet. And that's the birthdays.
We got one more.
We do?
One of my favorite people.
Oh my goodness.
Le Corbusier? Did you not have him on the list?
I did not have him on my list.
Did I jump ahead?
I think you did.
Oh, well, I think we should have him on anyway.
Happy birthday, Le Corbusier.
He's on the list.
He is, but I think he's next week's birthday, dude.
Really? All right. Well, famous architect Le Corbusier.
Yeah, Le Corbusier.
I have to say some of the. I'll say a couple personal things about him.
Yes.
Okay.
You can say
So number one, when I
personal
taught in Paris, I got to stay in this building, which is Le Corbusier building called the Swiss Center in Paris. It is a dormitory, and it was absolutely. I was in that place for a month. One of the most fantastic experiences just in terms of dormitory stay.
Cool.
The entire corrugated steel wall opened up and exposed the outside. So it was just exquisite. One of my favorite places. Loved that. Mom says love his chairs. Yes, of course. How can you not love his chairs? And then there's another connection I have to this building, which is it's the Center for Contemporary Arts. No, it's not. Why am I saying the Center for Contemporary Arts? I'm looking up at my notes and just reading whatever I see, which is just stupid. It is the Center for the Arts, Carpenter Center for the Arts at Harvard. And I have another connection to that building, which I don't need to go into, but I also like this one.
But you can go into it next week because his birthday is next Wednesday on October 6th. I love you. So we'll revisit him, if that's okay.
You remember the Caravaggio painting? That's going to be me later. Anyway.
Okay, and thus concludes our birthdays. Happy birthday, everybody.
There should be some applause or something after that.
Yes, we need an applause track.
All right,
Yes.
all right. We'll say happy birthday to him again next week.
Yes, we will.
So, a little bit about support for the show, if we can. Can I do that?
Yeah.
All right. So you guys have all heard the spiel. The usual suspects are all here. So getting to 200 followers, we're going to give away a great painting by Susan Stillman, which we're very excited about. And yes, we are also on Patreon. Patreon is a great way to support us, right? And also we've been doing some really cool limited content for Patreon that if you're a Patreon subscriber, you will get. So if you go over to patreon.com/thelargeglass, separated by underscores, you'll find all kinds of stuff about us. And on top of that, one last thing, if you happen to be an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can tie your Amazon Prime subscription to your Twitch login. It doesn't cost you any money. You're already paying for Prime, but you could give a small portion of that Prime subscription money to us just by linking those two and giving yourself a Prime subscription, because without any cost to you, all of a sudden we take some money away from those giants who enjoy building rockets and going into space, and you could support a really kind of fun arts-related program. So let's take from the rich and give to the poor.
Yes.
link your Prime account.
That would be us.
All right. So there's one good king with a little applause there. He's like,
applause.
yes. And we know why he's doing that. Thank you, one good king.
Yes, thank you.
We got an artist to talk about tonight.
We do have an artist to talk about tonight.
Should we get on it?
We should.
All right, let's go over here and let's get this started. So, who are we talking about tonight?
Tonight we're talking about Raymond Saa. He is, I'm going to say, mixed media artist. He uses a lot of different elements and kind of brings them all together in this beautiful stitch fabric. And I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. He's got quite an interesting background. He's pretty young. He's about our age.
I like how she does that.
I do that. He was born down in New Orleans. That's one of the reasons why we picked the drink that we picked tonight. He was mostly raised in Miami for the first decade or so of his life by his mom, single mom, and his grandparents. And then he eventually moved up to New Jersey. That's where he's got his home right now. He has a BFA from the Maryland Institute of Art in Baltimore, and he has his MFA from Parsons. And right now, I believe he's teaching at Drew University.
I believe he is, yes.
Okay.
And so he also does have Cuban roots. And I think his Cuban roots go to a lot. It's important to remember that as we begin to talk about his work, because it's going to help you sort of dive in a little bit deeper to what's going on. Now, one thing I found interesting and actually really resonate with Raymonds when he talks about his work, like oftentimes artists are asked, and I won't say this is a terrible question to ask an artist, right? But I don't think it's quite the right question to ask an artist. And that is the question of, well, what does your art mean? Because I would argue that that's a question that, well, maybe it's just me personally that doesn't want to answer that question. But I don't know if my art necessarily means anything. Meaning assumes that there is a prescribed thing that is assigned to a term or an icon or a symbol. So it's basically like I have this glyph and it means this. And if I assemble enough of those glyphs, that meaning might be able to be fleshed out. I don't know, but it means that it's like tied to that, right? I don't like that question. And what Raymond says in response to that is, my work really doesn't mean necessarily anything. It's really about me. It's me and me expressing who I am. And I really enjoy that. And I think that adds a visual depth, or it takes the visual depth and it gives it a deeper kind of connection, right? And so I as soon as I saw that, I was like, I've known Raymond for years. I haven't seen him in a while, but always appreciated the way in which he talked about his work, which was something that I kind of felt a connection to, in that there's maybe a frustration with that need to assign meaning to everything. So for what it's worth, that's something that I think kind of should just be. 63 says, the beauty of being out of grad school, don't have to answer that question. Yeah, that's part of it, right? But I think there's still a grad school mentality to a lot of the academically driven art machine, which is what most of it is, right? And so, we're always asked that question. But I like walking into someone's studio and looking at work like Raymond's and being like, yeah, this works.
I like this.
I like this, right? There's nothing wrong with that. All right, let's kind of keep moving here. So Raymond's background, a little bit about?
Raymond's background. So his mom, when he was growing up, had to take some jobs because she was raising him, like I said, as a single mom. And she picked up a lot of work as a seamstress. And being around this and growing up with this level of creativity in his home, he also started sewing pieces together. That's one of the reasons why he now incorporates machine work, machine sewing in particular, into his compositions. So it's one of the way that he collages fabrics and paper. He actually sews paper as well together.
And we're going to get into some of those pieces, but I want to jump back and forth just between some stuff that might kind of give you an idea and clue you into some of the work that he does. And we can keep the conversation going back and forth between process and the actual pieces. But these works are staggering. They're staggering in the way in which they utilize, the open spaces, the negative spaces, the positive spaces, the layers, the actual sewn stitching. I mean, we can keep going on and on and on about them, and we will. But I think at first glance, when you start to see what's going on in these, you really sort of, there's a monumentality to them. There's a level of detail to them. They're both intimate and...
There's some sculptural elements to them too. They're not just this two-dimensional surface. Like in this particular one that we're looking at, it's large scale too. I mean, we're talking about almost the size of a wall. And although it doesn't say touch me at all, it does have that element where you want to go in close and almost touch it and lift some of these pieces up. The actual piece is it's from the Flippy lid series, and he did several of these series that encompass these large walls back in 2017. A lot of it was acrylic on cardboard, And when you get close to it, you do want to interact in that way. You do want to move around the pieces. There are some, like you said, that there's some negative pieces. There's some interplay of shadow going on some of these compositions.
I really want to read One Good King's comment. He says, so interesting you mentioned glyphs. My immediate reaction to the background of his portrait, I think the first image we had up, was a combo of Matisse and Nishikado, the Space Invaders designer.
Oh.
And then I start looking at the one we have up here. I'm going to just kind of move in on this a little bit.
Oh, now I see the Space Invader reference.
Well, yeah, but it also kind of just, beyond that pixelization, there also is this kind of, there's a geometry in these pieces that's similar. Now, this doesn't play out in all of them, but that's a great point while we're looking at this one, I think. And I also like the fusion of those two things, the notion of Matisse being compared or, put in the same sort of box with Nishikado. So that's actually really kind of interesting. I didn't mean to go back, sorry. And here's another one that's got a similar vein.
One, and this is from the same series. And they're large. They're like 10 feet by 20 feet. This one's 10 feet by 10 feet. Again, acrylic on cardboard. They're enormous. You want to get in close. You want to see how those layers are laid upon each other and how far out from the wall it comes. And like I said, you almost want to touch it. We could talk about his palette. His palette is fantastic.
And we're going to see a lot of it.
And we're going to see a lot of that. And especially here, because you see this interplay of these very... I know you want to talk about the palette, so I'm trying to
talk about the palette.
Well, you had mentioned, like we had talked just a teeny weeny bit about this before the show, but a lot of the colors from his palette comes from his Cuban roots. You see those colors of like tangerine and melon, and they kind of resemble the colors of tropical fruits.
But there's also this exuberance in the way architecture is painted and the ways in which, cars from an entirely different time period have managed to stay in perfect shape, mostly out of, a need, but also there's a culture that's sort of, I love that notion of, when you see, I've always wanted to go to Cuba, okay? And I feel like by the time I get the chance to get there, it's probably going to have changed.
It probably will.
However, there is this really beautiful, preserved kind of history there, but at the same time with a touch of the new on top of that. So the vibrancy of the color paired with, it's sort of like a new meets old, not terribly new. I mean, I'm not talking like a technologically new. I mean, we're not talking like, like Tokyo new.
Well, no, I hear what you're saying. And when you're talking about those old colors, if you look at the design on this particular one, I get that mid-century modern design feel to it.
Absolutely.
Especially with that use of the black in the background and some of these other like cutouts, which is reminiscent of Matisse. It brings that design element of those mid-century modern starbursts and, those like stars that you would see
totally
in the decor.
Yeah, no, totally. I love that reference, actually. And, there are hints and pieces of that throughout this. Some bear, I would say that, if we're going to talk about something like a color palette that's reminiscent of Cuba, there are certain ones like this one, and even something like, let me just jump ahead here for a second, something like this one, right? Where there's an exuberance in the color, there's an electricity in the relationships of the color.
There's a certain vibrancy with your eyes. It's that whole physiology of what your eyes are doing with the color as well.
Absolutely, because you've got a lot of contrast of hue, right? In other words, you're taking things from equal points from each other on the color wheel and bringing them at us with their full intensity, and so they're naturally going to like bounce off of one another, right? So we've got we've got what's called a split complement color relationship here. Right, we've got the blue and that yellow orange, and then we've got red and green. And of course, if you were to take a square and lay that square out on the color wheel, you wind up with those points of the square all hitting those colors on the wheel. That relationship sets up that vibrancy, almost by default. But the new versus the old is also interesting too, because the new, might refer to things from paint technology or even just paint color and that vibrancy, right? I wish I could go back in time, 70 or 80 years ago and see what vibrancy that paint had on a building surface in that day.
When?
Because I feel like the technology of the paint and the ability for the paint to have that kind of color reflectivity might not have been what it is now. But that also might be naive me that hasn't been able to go back 70 years and look. Let's see, 63 says, I watched his Vimeo wall drawing videos. Pretty cool. Well, we're gonna show you that.
One.
So you're gonna see it again.
That's good. So you're prepared.
One Good King says, big leap from the earlier work, leaps off the screen. Yeah, yeah, it really does. And, I am jumping around a lot on this. But here, talking about leaping off the screen, or at least having a sort of a dimensionality to it, or a depth to it. This is not a newer work. It's not an earlier work. It's in between. What year was this one? Is this 18?
I think this one's one of the newer ones, actually.
Is it?
Let me just pull it up real quick.
I don't mean to.
Maybe
I'm
not.
throwing you
It
out.
probably is 2018.
I think it's 18,
Going back.
or even earlier. Yeah, it's 17.
It's 2017. So this one is gouache collage on sewn paper, and you can actually see his stitch work. The fine lines are machine stitch.
Here we go. We're gonna look. We're gonna get closer.
28.5 by 20.25 inches.
And this is another thing that I just am blown away by in this, and that is the sewing machine as a drawing tool.
Yes.
And we talked about this with Anna Teresa Barbosa, and how the sewing, in her case, it was more the embroidery and the physicality of the string itself became a drawing. In this case, it's a mechanized use of the string as drawing, which sets up this really beautiful kind of pattern work. But at the same time, check this out. I want to see if I can move this. Can I move this around? I don't even know if I can move this around. Yes, I can. I love the way, like, if you look at this line work from the sewing machine here on the left side of the screen, it's a machine, but it's not perfect. It has the ability to have a slight, like gestural,
rendered kind of feel to it.
Right. That little imperfection inside of what the machine does, really gorgeous. Just beautiful work. Oh wait, we got some more. Ben says, I think the colors of the past would be bright still, but a bit of a dull look. And I think that's exactly what I'm thinking. I think there's something about the way pigment is suspended in a vehicle nowadays, meaning, whether it's latex or enamel, or in this case, it might even be oil. But the way those pigments are processed and suspended in that vehicle is probably better, right? Just in terms of the color's vibrancies. Chalkier. That's a good point. It probably was chalkier. Let's see. Let's.
It's funny when I look at something like this piece, and I think back on some of the other artists that we have featured who've used collage and sewing in their compositions. And it's kind of like what you were saying with the way that he's using it. Like, he's meticulous, though. Even though, like, the machine line will wander here and there, and it'll be like a little less machine-like. It seems more authentic. He's still so careful with that line.
Yeah.
If we look at somebody like we've covered before, like Benny Andrews, when he would use collage elements with fabric, or Chabalala self, and you could see some of the stitching in her work as well, but it had nothing to do with the stitching with her work. It was more about how she was laying these pieces and the colors and everything into her pieces. His pieces, a big part of them is that stitch work and is that line work in those compositions.
Well, and of course, given the history of sewing for him, right? I would expect him to want to call attention to that, and just from number one, it imbues the work with that kind of deeply personal history. Number one, but number two, it is also a really, really beautiful element of just what's in his toolkit, right? Because all of these shapes that are cut out of whether the paper or fabric, and we'll get to some of the fabric pieces in a little bit, but having that ability to have that very subtle line and the contrast between that line and a larger shape is really, that's a beautiful thing.
I'm curious to hear his thoughts on the process of sewing on paper versus sewing on fabric. Like, I'm just curious which one, like what he thinks about that, because sewing on paper, I imagine, is quite a different experience because it's coarse. It probably has more direction. It's not giving like fabric gives. I wonder if it's less frustrating in a way. But I'm just curious.
It might be. I have to say that, and I'm going to make this personal for me, which, I don't necessarily want to do, but I'm a little bit envious in this that he took so much of what he does from his mother's sewing work, because I watch my mom sew. And as a sculptor, I work across a variety of media, but as somebody who's really trained sculpturally, when I see what you can do with soft materials and sewing, it almost to me is like it's like the pinnacle of all that dimensional work should be allowed to do, right? But it's complicated. And I watch her figure out problems and handle things with, she's a master. And I feel like I got to get that. That's like the one thing that I always struggle with. She, like every time we bust out the sewing machine, I'm like, Mom, show me how to sew. She's like, you still don't know how to wind a bobbin? And I'm like, no. She's going to say something in the chat in a minute. But, I also, let's move on. I like what he does with a more subdued color palette as well, something that feels like it's a little bit more controlled. By controlled, I mean...
Well, there's some grays. You see a big gray scale in this. And then with those cooler colors and the blues, there's enough similarity where it's not so striking. You don't have those like bold, hot pink colors and yellow colors.
Right, but grayscale can play tricks on color as well, right? And not always necessarily allow a color that might be juxtaposed with that gray to be what it needs to be. That color can also spill over into the gray area through either a trick of the eye or an absorption, like a visual absorption that the gray might sort of take on its neighboring color. These all sort of appear to stay relatively isolated, which... I actually can really appreciate, especially given the layering, right? The layering and that dimensionality that you mentioned before, I think begins to do something new to the color in a very soft, subtle way. A little cast shadow, takes that peach and gives it a little bit of a darker edge just before it intersects with that blue. It's kind of like, there's really something careful about this that may or may not have been intended, but really subtly has... it ties all that together. All those little shadow lines seem to function like the stitching in some kind of interesting way. They're like another level.
Yeah.
Mom says, I love working with you on the sewing machine. We need to get back to pattern making. Yeah, I need a couple of lessons. Any of you all that want to come along for the lesson, you're all invited over to get sewing lessons from my mom. So, and there's different levels to which he incorporates these grays. And, okay, so, I guess the point here is that Raymond's got an amazing sensibility for color, right? And I've seen a couple of artists like this along the way that do this really, really well. Jim Osmond does this really, really well.
He definitely does. He was one of the first people that came to mind.
Yeah. When I was in Jim's studio yesterday, he showed me something that just made my head come off. We have to have him on the show again because he has this rack of little walnut scraps all in a line, each one painted with every color he uses. Now there's probably, I'm gonna say approximately maybe 36 colors in this rack. I didn't count, but maybe 36 colors in this rack. And you can rearrange them like tiles to look at the ways in which the different colors interact with one another. And it's got a little lift on it so you can sit it there. But I think people that really carefully consider color, and I'm absolutely certain Raymond is one of them, there's a play that takes place in looking at the ways in which all the colors interact. I know people that have this that come to them intuitively, and then I know people that sort of, they have an intuition about it, but it involves an experimentation, this with this, this with this, this with that. And then once you put this with that, and then you bring the third one in down here, it actually can alter this. And so you wind up really always kind of having to reevaluate. And I love the way that sort of bodes for how that composition ultimately will turn out. So, God, the Sazerac is like slamming me in the head, and I'm talking a lot.
Yeah.
63. You're making me think about Mark Bradford. Different but kindred spirits. Hold on a minute. Why am I not able to remember Mark Bradford's coming up? Let's take a look at Mark Bradford. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I can see it in that there is this kind of layered...
There's definitely like a depth going on with his color play because it really recedes in the background.
Let me see if I can get one of these up for everybody to see. This is a great reference, 63, because it's very different, but I can see the relationship. Let's see, Mark Bradford.
He's saying his mother was a hairdresser.
Oh.
Some of these are great.
I really like this picture of him working here. Let's see if we can just put this up on the screen for a second. It's just going to take me a minute.
I was even thinking of that large mural right there that wraps around the corner.
Well, you know, I think, you know, this is one of the things I really like about these. There are subtle ties sometimes that you can sort of flesh out in these things, and this one's actually really interesting to me. Wait a minute. For some reason, the internet doesn't like that. Hold on. But, you know, back to color for a minute while I struggle like a total noob to get this image up. I really feel like the color aspect of this is really key, and I really feel like that surrounding tile, that surrounding lattice, that surrounding sort of shingled kind of look is really important in that it sort of is like it's like a holding space. It's like an interlude. It's like something in between two things, or it's like a surface to build on, obviously, right? But there's something about the way that supports, magnifies, intensifies, and deals with that color. I still don't think I have this image, but maybe I do. All right, let's try it. Where'd it go? Here we go. So here's Mark Bradford. This is kind of an interesting piece in relationship to Raymond's work, actually. This is the artist that 63 just brought up. But, you know, you can see this kind of, I just mentioned, like a shingled kind of layered appearance. That's definitely there. There's a shape situation that begins to generate from what he's layering in. I don't know much about his work, though. But Carolyn Thou...
Maybe talk about...
Oh, Carolyn Thou says Mark Bradford. I told you about him at the beginning of the large class. He's based in California. Good. Okay, now we've got two references. This is somebody I think we need to kind of
dig
start.
a little deeper.
His process is incredible. Well, between 63 and Carolyn Thou, we have to get on this. All right, let's get back to Raymond for a second, or actually for the rest of the show. I've got a few other artists actually to throw in on this that I think are actually kind of interesting. Some references that I sort of made on this. I like the Bradford reference. But when I look at something like this, right, and, you know, this is, again, another rendition of the one that we were looking at, but now with a complete shift, a little bit more contrast between the ground and what is essentially, you know, the figurative area. But when I look at some of the individual shapes, right, inside of this, and then I look at, say, something like this, okay? So they bear resemblance, right? Subtle changes in the ground, subtle changes in the way the shapes are sort of, you know, maybe harvested. And I don't use harvested lightly because the next reference I'm going to make, I think, actually sort of plays. But I cannot not think of Ellsworth Kelly's plant drawings, right?
Yes, I can
Which
see
to
that.
me are some of the single most beautiful drawings ever made, right? I love these Ellsworth Kelly drawings. There's another one. And you sort of start to really think about a number of things, right? I mean, obviously, we're going to think about the ways in which line can sort of dictate volume and form, and of course, shape. And in Ellsworth Kelly's case, shape is key, right? And there's an even-handedness to that line. So they are almost intentionally flat, but with some structure. But then if you think about that versus that versus that, like I bounce back and forth between these and I'm like, wow, some of the discoveries I think Kelly was making in looking at these plant forms and drawing them almost in a blind contour kind of way, and how he probably extracted some of the shapes in his work from this. And then I go back here and I look at Raymond's work, and then I start to think about how all of that negative space in some of the cutouts, once laid on top and sewn together, now creates an entirely new and unexpected thing below it. Mm-hmm. But then it gets even better. Okay, it gets even better. And I'm starting to see this now. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to go down, and I start to see this form. Look at the form on the bottom edge. It's 3/4 the way over towards our window here. It's the one that's sort of a tan with yellow and a nice like reddish pink color. And I look at that, and it really begins to play with you, because what is essentially the ground plane, which is that grayish tan, now all of a sudden it floats on top and becomes the one of the deciding factors in how the negative space is sort of played. Mm-hmm. And so he's really thinking about how he's pushing and pulling these spaces, mm-hmm. right? And that's really kind of beautiful and interesting to me.
Well, I think a lot of, you had been talking about boundaries being pushed, like in his artwork, and even now, I mean, when you look at this, it's really squares. It's a bunch of squares together, right? But because of all these shapes with a lot of curves and receding and coming forward, like you almost don't see that square. You don't see the confines of these miniature, I believe he calls them postcards even, placed together, because the shape, the continuity of the shape and coming in and out changes all of that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I actually like that notion of the postcard, number one, for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. Like there was a I don't want to go too far away from what we're talking about, but there was something written about him on one of the articles I saw that said that his past or his roots in Cuba, he was never even able to experience because they were taken from him before he was able to breathe his first breath, mm-hmm. which is kind of interesting. So then what do you have? Well, the postcard, the notion of the postcard, right? This kind of wish you were here mm-hmm. kind of thing. It really starts to kind of become really relevant in terms of that missing a place, right? Yes. So the commentary is getting interesting because 63 mentions Hans Arp and Sculptores like Arp. That's a great connection of contour and expressive forms. And so, here's an Arp piece that I just grabbed really quickly. And sure, because, if I were going to sort of look for that space between the way in which a Ellsworth Kelly plant drawing shape and how there's the contour that's trying to denote a form, some of it is staying relatively flat. Like if I'm going to draw, let's say I wanted to denote form in a linear drawing, right? My line weight changes, right? It gets lighter as it comes up and around the top, more well-lit side of a form. It might get a little heavier as it drops down behind. Kelly handles these leaves in a very even fashion. He only denotes form with a little bit of overlap, right? A little bit of overlap. So there's an inherent flatness here, but not a total flatness. Then you get over to Arp's paintings, and now if there is any form at all, it's probably between the interplay between, contrast of tone, maybe, or contrast of value, where you've got dark and light playing off, like those black and blue areas seem to recede, the yellow area comes forward. It implies that there's maybe an undulating space in the green. But I think that plays here, right? Because then you get back into this, and all of a sudden now you got a new way to think about how these forms not only interact with each other from a physical layered standpoint, one on top of the other, but a layered standpoint in terms of the way the colors play with one another. Word salad. I've had too much of the Sazerac.
No. Too much of the absinthe.
I haven't even had that much. Look.
No.
Look at where I am. I'm
there.
barely touching this thing.
Yes.
It's getting better. Like it's actually getting Arp on. Art on steroids.
Yes.
I need to put my glasses on. I highly recommend this. Maybe we should put the recipe up. Maybe we'll blog the recipe.
We could do that.
You got to make these. Scultori, when you come out, we're going to make these. I think this is something we should make. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going because I can't wait to get to. We're not there yet, but you want to watch? Should we watch the video?
I kind of do.
That's a good idea.
Let's watch that video because it's a little bit different. It's going to take us away from some of these because we're going to see process and we're going to see his drawing in action. We are, and you know the nice thing about this, I find about this video is all of those things: process, the drawings in action, but there's sort of like a these live and die very quickly. I was going to say the mortality is, there's something almost depressing about it, but yeah, but there's also potential in it. Yeah, right. You'll see. Which which I think is okay. And hang on, I just want to fix one thing here, so we're not sound off because. So one of the things I like about this is Raymond is using a song called "Messin' Around" by Ray Charles in this. If I allow it to play, we're going to get DMCA'd, so I've muted it. So we're going to talk. We're going to talk while it's playing, but yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Here we go. I have to say, this video goes really well with the song. Like when you watch this, we'll link to this also in the description of the video tomorrow. I almost feel like if we talk, it would take away from the video. I'm sorry, I'll shut up. No. Is that your way of telling me to be quiet? No, not at all. It's just explaining why I'm not saying anything. Yeah, 63 was typing the same thing I was saying. We were on the same track there. See, if we had the kazoos, oh God, we could play them. I don't know. If I were Raymond and I was watching this and we were playing kazoos to this, I would be like, what? Although I think kazoos for birthdays. Yes. I love these drawings. I love how you start seeing depth happen right before your eyes with some of them. But he also, like, you can see the way he's reacting to certain shapes that crop up, and then all of a sudden a space gets filled in that wasn't intended, but there it is, and now it happens. Yeah. And I can't help but think that when he obliterates the one below it and comes into the next one, that even the marks of obliteration have to do some kind of informing of what's going on to a degree. Right? Or maybe the underimage, what's floating around underneath. Look at this. This is incredible. With the line drawings, too, that it's almost like the negative space over the black forms. I think he scratches into the wall to make those drawings. That's really, it almost does the same work as the stitch would do, only it's a little bit more chaotic. It's a beautiful video. You should go check it out with the music. Different experience for sure. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that. I don't know. I just started something playing, I feel like, in there. Ooh. So let's just get out of this because I'm going to make a mess. Okay. So a couple of things on that I found to be really interesting, and I think actually have a reference again to a little Cuban thing that I was reading about that I think is actually kind of interesting, and that is this. I look at a lot of street art. I look at a lot of graffiti. I teach it a lot in my classes, as if you can teach something like that, but we talk about it a lot. Street art in Cuba
there's obviously an ephemerality to street art. It comes, and then someone comes along and covers it over, and it goes away. In Cuba, it goes away very fast because the government doesn't necessarily want this. Street art in its nature is subversive. And so any kind of that, I think that's a way of just kind of taking that out of the conversation. And so street art lives and dies quickly, which I think makes it even more beautiful, right? And so these wall drawings, I mean, they're even called wall drawings, right? They're on a wall.
Right.
To me, that totally references street art culture. And what happens when they get obliterated? Well, they get painted over with a basic white paint, right? So that's kind of a really nice way of sort of talking about that, I guess. Let's keep going through a few more here. There's some that I find to be difficult, and that's why I put this one in here.
You find this one to be difficult?
Well, just from the standpoint of looking at all of the other work. And I'm curious about that, and also very intrigued by it, and I spend a little bit more time with it because of that. If you think about the elements that are present in this one, it almost feels like he's trying to juggle things that shouldn't be juggled. And by shouldn't, I mean, where are there rules that say you shouldn't do that? However, you've got a very sort of graphic, black and white, straight linear mark, right? You've got a very organic, saturated color mark. You've got a very, very soft sort of off-white ground that really lives awkwardly on one side and not so much on the other. And on the side that it doesn't live with, that graphical element really takes over. And so there's like this really strange kind of balancing thing going on here that I frankly kind of like, in that the harmony.
Yes.
Like if you want to talk about harmony, I mean, there's so many pieces that have this kind of, here's black, white, gray, color, saturated color, diluted color, all coming together and creating a harmony, right? You want to talk about here's four very difficult colors to mash together, finding a harmony by just the right amount of that tan bleeding through that space. And then we go here, and it's like, it's like there's a sharp note in there. Forgive the piano reference with all the black and white, but there's a sharp note in there that doesn't quite work in that scale. But creates a level of intrigue for why it's going that way. Does that make sense? I like the piece a lot. Like, I'm not saying this in a way that says I'm put off by it. It actually draws me into it a little bit more. It's like an unexpected kind of dissonance that plays, right?
I guess so. I think when I look at something like that, I just see the juxtaposition between untamed wild versus civilized culture, because you have order in these graphic pieces with the black and the white, but then you see that organic proliferation of shapes just coming into play, and it's definitely more lively in color and palette and stuff like that. I really love when he does this. And I feel like it's really fresh, and I feel like it's really new. I don't see anybody else doing this, and that's really exciting to me. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm not, when I say those, when to me, if it's difficult, I'm there.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning that when something's,
That's good for you, because sometimes when it's difficult, I bail. I do. There have been a couple of artists that I just tried to get, and I didn't get them, and I admit I bailed on them. So
well,
I keep trying to revisit them.
No, I think you're very good at that.
In hopes that I get what I'm missing, and one I can think of in particular that I'm not going to mention, I try to keep going back to her work to understand it and love it and appreciate it, because I know a lot of people do, but I have such a hard time understanding it.
Sure. Oh, Shirley's here. Hi, Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
Nice to see you. We got some comments coming in. So Let's see, Scultori says, I'm wondering how much Ray is referencing the New York school in the way he continually destroys the previous work by painting out and over continually. That's an interesting comment, and I think there's some other interesting New York school references in there when it comes to things like, now I'm gonna totally draw a blank because I've had too much to drink, but give me a second and the name reference I'm trying to think of will come. Like, you know, like maybe Adolf Gottlieb or give me time, Scultori, it's gonna come. Let's see, John Park says that wall seems next level when next to this other work, or maybe it's just me. Yeah, well, when you say next level, I feel like it's got this kind of, well, first of all, to me, some of this work has a time element built into it. That wall kind of has an obvious kind of time element built into it. I mean, it's kind of a time lapse, right? So it's got time in it. But these other ones, to me, I think a little bit about time, just from the standpoint of the overlapping, the literal standpoint of what I was talking about before between this kind of old and the new. There's a presence of time in that forming. But I do like, I mean, that wall was a very different thing.
Very different. It was also one of his older pieces. Some of these pieces that we're looking at now, like the one on the screen, this is from like 2018, 2019. The wall was from about 7 or 8 years ago. So and back then he wasn't doing these at all. So there's that progression.
And you can see where that comes out of from the earlier work. Like if you guys go and visit his website, and I do have
it's RaymondSaa.com.
Yeah, no, I have that, and there's also an Instagram for him that we can throw up there. But
and actually, if you look on RaymondSaa.com and you go right to his work with the 2013 wall drawings, that's where the video is located. There is a link to directly click on it and see it with the soundtrack, because that's part of it too. And in a way, it's performance art. Like, that's one of the times that we actually get to see him performing and drawing, and we see some photography elements with that and some videography. So it's like a whole mixed media.
Yeah. One Good King says, feels heavy-handed on the elements, overly metaphoric. And he's talking about this piece here. And I think that might be why I find it difficult, is that kind of, all right, now I'm going to bring in all my heavy artillery into one piece. And rather than sort of, tone things down a little bit in one area or another, I'm going to let's see what I can do with all of that power at one time, right? So, we were talking about color relationships before, like a split complement. Well, if you take like a hexatic color relationship, which is basically 6 colors equidistant on the color wheel all at once in their full sort of good luck, managing that much visual power in a composition, right? Like you say that to a student, you're like, okay, 6 colors equally spaced on the color wheel, make an abstract composition with that, go. That's tough to do.
Yeah.
Really tough to do.
Really tough.
63 says, Terry, don't tell me Twombly.
It's not Twombly. I like Twombly. And the thing I like about Twombly is that it's almost like an asymmetric writing sometimes when he's doing these characters and figures on the wall. There's actually been books written about how to decipher his code, so I enjoy him immensely. It's a contemporary female artist. That's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Wait, what are we referencing?
The artist that I'm struggling with.
Oh, the one that you kind of put aside? Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan Wexler says, thanks for introducing me to this amazing work. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
I should say, Glenn Leveritu's here. He doesn't like us to say his name. I should say his screen name. This one feels like Jasper John's derivative late work.
Huh.
I agree with One Good King about heavy-handed. Yeah, that's kind of a cool reference, actually. Well, you know what? Let's move into some of these, because these are the ones I was kind of hoping to get to. These are very different, and we're kind of running late on the time. And so I want to kind of get into some of these pieces, which are now
These are his paintings.
He calls these paintings, which I agree with. I'm not saying, well, it's not up to me to agree or disagree.
They're mostly acrylic on collaged canvas. We see some of the stitch work again. They're rather large. 60 by 54 inches would be a typical size. A little bit more neutral in the palette.
Well, they are, and I think that, now what's happening in these is there's a really nice balance between how the shapes and the way they're sewn to the canvas are allowed to have their kind of, they're having their day because the color is not overwhelming them. I'm not saying that that's what was necessarily happening in the drawings, and by drawings I mean sewn paper pieces, right? But there is this kind of really nice balance between the muted color and the physicality of the stitch work, right? And so,
And actually, even in his layering, because before in some of the things, there were the squares and the postcards, and they were very cautious in how they were laid out. I mean, cautious meaning we didn't see some of the behind the scenes work like we see here. We see the materials coming through that they're laid upon here.
Yeah.
Almost like a careful carelessness in a weird way.
Well, or maybe a discovery that what's going on under there, number one, might not have been revealed with paper, right? Now I think some of the pliability of the canvas allows for that.
And the fabric, yeah.
And so maybe just through the process of sewing these things together, it's that moment where you're like, wow, look at that line that's created when one form lays over the other and the other's line is still there. There's this sort of visual phenomenon that happens in art called continuance, where like a line can kind of do its thing and go on an understandable trajectory and disappear, but the mind fills it in, right? And so
and like with these too, he really allows them to do what they're going to do. Like we see drip marks in here from different ones going, and almost like a staining on some of the pieces. It's not that uniform color on some of the collaged pieces. So you see, it's a little bit different from previous works.
Yeah, and I think now what's happening is, I'm guessing here that the physicality of the paper and what Raymond puts it through with the sewing machine and the cutting and probably the rearranging, there's probably an immense amount of care that needs to be taken to execute that. The canvas is like indestructible, right? And so I have a funny feeling that the physical nature of his body, just handling this and sewing it, can be a little bit more, forceful in finding out what can happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that was one of the things that struck me about his overall portfolio in general. It does seem a very physical thing. You have the cutting and the collaging and sewing together. He uses an X-Acto knife for all the paper components, and I feel like he really gets in there with the materials.
Yeah. And I keep going back to this new shift in the palette. It gets a little bit more saturated here, right? But there's this really, I'm so interested in what's going on underneath, or in what is essentially not as visible. I won't say invisible, but
it's also, those things are creating different lines too,
because
underneath. Right? They're almost creating a drawing.
Yeah, no, they totally are. They totally are. I'm thinking back to some of the forms that had those open spaces, those negative voids in them, and how they began to crop things that were underneath them, and how these sort of do something different. They're fleshing out these new shapes, but instead of cropping them, they're sort of pushing through them, right? And it's connecting between different shapes. It's really just really quite cool. Yeah. I feel like this leap from the paper pieces into here, for me, I find to be, stellar. Like I'm really interested in these pieces. I can spend a lot of, I do love the beauty and precision and layering in all of those paper ones. These, though, for me, are really profound and have something really special going on in them.
I love all of it.
I love all of it.
I love all of it. I love that last one that you got your pointer on right there.
This one?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because here we are pushing that saturation a little bit.
Yep.
I feel like there's a little bit more of, like if I look at this one and then I go back to this one here feels...
And he's not too worried about one color being in one area. He's not, has certain artists, like you try to get that eye to move around the composition and you're worried if you have too much color in one area, it becomes a little bit bottom heavy or top heavy or anything like that. He's not concerned about that at all. He's done it in several pieces where he will just push one color to one side, and he's got a certain confidence that your eye will move around that piece.
Mm-hmm. Although I would argue that I think that bottom weight to that saturated colors presence is absolutely intentional. I mean,
it is, but you still keep wandering to the top. It doesn't hold you there. You still keep trying to get away from it a little bit.
Yeah.
To
No,
look around.
no,
so
for sure. I love the way that subtle light blue, that sky blue, little delta triangle on the bottom and the right on the bottom wraps just around and sort of gives the reference that it's cupped because it comes back around on the left side also, almost as if there's like a little shallow there.
Yeah, well, even that gray plane on the left side, it almost seems to go behind that top blue form, and it's almost like we're looking through glass and seeing the shadow behind the glass too. So there's some really cool things happening in these pieces that you don't see with the paper collages.
Right. Yeah, and Glenn's like, this is a good one, and I agree. I think this is definitely one of the stronger ones, and again, there's that same not awkwardness, but that the difficulty I had with that one with the heavy black pattern. I feel like there's a little bit of that here, but in a way that I find to be really intriguing, right? And it's what you're talking about how a lot of that saturated color comes in at the very, very bottom, and then it sort of billows up out of that. But I feel like that's a strength, not an issue.
Yeah.
And John says, yeah, this is my favorite so far. Well, that's good because that's the last one I have to show.
Yes. Winner.
Winner.
Yes.
So I don't know. I was really happy to talk about this one.
Yeah, I love him. I absolutely love him.
Do we know if he has anything coming up exhibition-wise?
I don't know.
All right.
Well, but if we find out,
we need to find that out, number one. And number two, I did put his socials up there. So on Instagram, you can find him at Raymond_Saa. Definitely give him a follow. His Instagram account is it's so curated and beautiful. It's just so like, you can just keep going. It's gorgeous stuff. There's so much of his work. He's incredibly prolific. He's got a piece on Artsy right now that's for sale.
Yes.
Did you get me that for my birthday?
I did not. I did get you something you're really going to like for your birthday, but I did not get you that.
Okay. Well,
okay.
All right. Anyway,
make sure you watch Instagram on Thursday to play that game. Try to win a pin. It's a lot of fun.
And next week, we have Anne Sherwood Pundyke, who has a show at the Brownstone Art right now in Brooklyn. I went out there and had a really, really lovely time with her, talking about her work, interviewing her on camera. I don't know how much of that we're actually going to use on the show because she's going to be with us to talk about that show. I'm super excited about that. So definitely join us for a live in the studio visit from her. And we have, let's see, 2 weeks out from that, we have another live artist in the studio. And then 3 weeks out from that, we have another one. So we've got before we hit the middle of November, we've got 3 live artists coming on the show. So we're just stoked.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
Something to be thankful for.
For Thanksgiving. All right, everybody. Well, Pumpkin Audrey says, such a cool artist. Thank you. Mom says, love the work. Great show tonight. Thank you. One Good King says, love these last pieces. Cool. Good. Ben says, great show tonight, you guys. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Well, the Sazerac. Thank you.
I am so happy you didn't drink that whole thing.
I'm going to finish it after they're all gone. I'll see you on Thursday. Jess Park, this was great. Thanks so much. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome.
We look forward to seeing you guys every week. So
I don't
awesome.
I don't have a quote for us to end on tonight. We'll get back on the quote thing soon. But look forward to the recipe for the Sazerac. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for coming. We will talk to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.